What if one single scoop stirred into your morning coffee could burn belly fat while you sit on the couch? Without changing your diet or picking up a single weight, just your regular cup with one thing added. And no, I am not talking about coconut oil, not collagen, not some overpriced mushroom blend. This is a compound your body has been quietly running low on for years, and the deficit gets worse every year past 40. If you are dragging yourself through mornings no matter how long you slept, if your strength is fading and your thinking feels like it is running through mud, that is not aging. That is a cellular energy crisis, and it has a specific cause that almost nobody is talking about. I am Dr. Daniel Ashford. I have spent over 2 decades working with patients, and I have lost count of how many patients over 50 have sat across from me describing the exact same pattern: exhausted, losing muscle, carrying abdominal weight that will not respond to anything. I kept seeing it trace back to one cellular deficit, and it changed how I practice. Before we continue, please drop your age in the comments right now. I want to know who is watching and where you are in this process so I can help you directly. Over the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly why this compound supercharges coffee into a fat-burning, muscle-protecting, fog-clearing tool, the precise way to use it at home. And where most people go wrong and end up feeling worse instead of better. The compound is creatine. And before you tune out because you associate that word with young athletes and protein shake culture, stay with me. That association is one of the most damaging misconceptions in modern nutrition. Creatine is not a performance enhancer in the way most people imagine. It is a foundational energy molecule. Every cell in your body, especially the ones in your brain and your muscles, depends on it to produce something called ATP. Think of ATP as the electricity that powers every function inside you, and creatine is the raw material your cells need to generate that electricity. Without enough of it, the lights dim, your muscles fatigue faster, your thinking slows, your metabolism downshifts, and fat accumulates in places it should not. Here is what most people do not appreciate. Your body manufactures creatine on its own, primarily in your liver and kidneys, using amino acids from the food you eat. But that internal manufacturing process declines steadily with age. By your mid-40s, production has already dropped enough to create a measurable shortfall. By 60 or 70, the gap is substantial. You are essentially trying to run a modern household on a generator that is losing output year after year. And what makes this worse is that the organ most affected is your brain. Your brain accounts for roughly 2% of your total body weight. Check, but it consumes close to 20% of your entire energy supply. A disproportionate share of that energy depends on creatine stored directly in your neurons and brain tissue. So when creatine levels fall, cognitive function takes the hit first. Slower recall, weaker focus, that cloudy sensation people describe as brain fog. It is not just aging, it is a fuel shortage. And unlike a blood sugar dip that you can fix with a meal, this is a structural deficit. Your neurons are literally underpowered. They cannot fire as quickly, cannot sustain attention as long, and cannot clear metabolic waste as efficiently. Imagine trying to run a hospital on half its electrical capacity. The lights stay on, but the operating rooms slow down. The monitors glitch, and everything takes longer than it should. That is your brain on depleted creatine. Now here is why coffee changes the equation. When you dissolve the right form of creatine into your coffee, you are not just stacking 2 substances together. You are creating a synergistic delivery system. The caffeine in coffee increases blood flow to the cerebral cortex, the region responsible for reasoning, memory, and executive function. It also improves the rate at which your muscle fibers recruit during physical activity and enhances cellular uptake of nutrients. So the coffee is essentially opening the doors wider, and the creatine walks right through. Coffee sharpens your alertness and reaction speed. Creatine extends your mental stamina and endurance. Together, they cover both ends of cognitive performance. But the metabolic piece is where this gets particularly compelling for anyone carrying stubborn abdominal fat. Here is the mechanism. Creatine supports the building and preservation of lean muscle tissue. The more lean muscle your body carries, the more energy it burns at rest, not during a workout. At rest, sitting in a chair and reading the newspaper, watching this right now. Your resting metabolic rate is largely determined by how much metabolically active tissue you have, and muscle is the most metabolically active tissue in your body. A 1998 study published in the American Journal of Physiology confirmed that skeletal muscle accounts for approximately 20 to 30% of total resting energy expenditure. So more muscle means a higher baseline calorie burn without lifting a finger. Additionally, muscle tissue acts as a glucose sink. When you eat, a portion of the sugar from that meal gets pulled directly into your muscle cells without requiring insulin to escort it there. That means your pancreas does not have to work as hard. Insulin levels stay lower, and since elevated insulin is one of the primary hormonal drivers of fat storage, particularly around the midsection, keeping insulin in check is one of the most effective strategies for reducing visceral fat. This is the belly fat that wraps around your organs and drives inflammation. It is also the fat most strongly associated with cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and even certain cancers. A 2015 review in the journal Obesity Reviews confirmed that visceral fat produces inflammatory cytokines at a rate far exceeding subcutaneous fat, the kind you can pinch. So when I tell you that preserving lean muscle helps control visceral fat, I am not talking about aesthetics. I am talking about reducing a direct source of systemic inflammation. Creatine supports the tissue that naturally regulates this entire process. The published evidence on this is extensive. Creatine is among the most rigorously studied compounds in nutritional science. There are over 6,000 peer-reviewed papers examining its effects. I am obviously not going to walk you through all of them, but here is what the data consistently demonstrates. Measurable improvements in strength, power output, and lean body composition, enhanced recovery between bouts of physical activity, faster replenishment of glycogen, which is your stored muscle fuel, greater ATP regeneration, meaning your cells recharge more efficiently. And here is the part that matters most for those of you over 55 or 60. Creatine is protective against sarcopenia, which is the clinical term for age-related muscle wasting. Sarcopenia is one of the leading predictors of falls, fractures, loss of independence, and metabolic decline in older adults. After age 30, the average person loses roughly 3 to 5% of their muscle mass per decade. After 60, that rate accelerates. A 2021 meta-analysis in the journal Nutrients, examining over 700 participants aged 50 and older, found that creatine supplementation combined with resistance training significantly increased lean body mass and upper body strength compared to training alone. And even for people who do not train with weights, creatine has demonstrated the ability to slow muscle wasting and preserve functional capacity. A separate trial from the University of Saskatchewan found that older adults who supplemented with creatine during a structured walking program showed greater gains in lean tissue than those who only walked. Protecting muscle is not vanity. It is survival. It is staying on your feet. It is getting out of a chair without help. It is remaining in your own home. On the cognitive side, the research is equally striking. Controlled human trials show that creatine supplementation improves working memory, reaction time, and resistance to mental fatigue. These benefits are especially pronounced in people who are sleep deprived, under chronic stress, older, or following a low-protein or plant-based diet, because all of those conditions further deplete your creatine reserves. There is even emerging evidence connecting creatine to mood regulation. Several studies suggest it may help alleviate symptoms of depression, likely by restoring energy metabolism in the prefrontal cortex, the area of your brain most involved in emotional regulation and decision-making. A 2018 trial published in the Journal of Clinical Psychopharmacology found that women with major depressive disorder who added creatine to their antidepressant regimen showed significantly greater improvement than those on medication alone. Beyond mood, creatine also supports hormonal health. It plays a role in testosterone signaling, which matters for both men and women as they age. It bolsters cellular resilience against oxidative stress, the kind of low-grade damage that accumulates year after year and accelerates aging at the mitochondrial level. And it reduces chronic inflammation, one of the central drivers behind nearly every degenerative disease of aging. This is not a stimulant. It is not a shortcut. It is a cellular raw material that your body has been running short on quietly for years. Now I want to tell you about someone I will call Margaret, 71 years old, retired school administrator, and she came to see me because she felt like her body was falling apart despite doing everything she was told, walking 4 days a week, eating salads, taking a multivitamin and fish oil, but she had gained 14 pounds in 2 years, all around her midsection. Her fasting glucose had crept up to 112. Her doctor had mentioned she was heading toward prediabetes, and she described her thinking as operating through a wet blanket. She told me she had started writing grocery lists because she could no longer trust herself to remember 5 items. We ran her labs, and her overall picture was a textbook case of metabolic stagnation. Not diabetic, not critically ill, just slowly declining in a way that conventional advice was not reversing. I introduced her to a simple protocol: 5 grams of creatine monohydrate dissolved in her morning coffee, taken daily. She made no other changes. 4 weeks later, Margaret reported that the fog had lifted noticeably by week 2. By week 4, her fasting glucose had dropped to 101. She had lost 4 pounds without changing her diet. And for the first time in 2 years, she said she felt like her brain was working at full speed again. Then there was a man I will call Thomas, 64. Semi-retired electrician, never set foot in a gym. He told me creatine was for kids in tank tops, his exact words. But he was losing grip strength. His knees ached when he climbed stairs, and he was waking up every morning feeling like he had not slept. His wife said he had stopped opening jars for her because his hands were not reliable anymore. That shook him. I convinced him to try the coffee protocol for 30 days. Just 1 scoop, every morning. By day 10, he noticed his hands felt stronger. By week 3, he was climbing stairs without bracing himself on the railing. At his 1-month follow-up, his wife told me he was sharper in conversation than he had been in years. No gym, no special diet. Just a cellular fuel that his body had been quietly running out of. I call this the fuel approach. F stands for fuel your cup. Brew your coffee however you prefer, pour it, and stir in 5 grams, which is 1 level scoop, of high-quality creatine monohydrate. U stands for undisturbed absorption. Drink it ideally on an empty stomach, or at least 90 minutes after waking, to let your cortisol naturally settle before introducing caffeine. E stands for every single day. Creatine operates through saturation. It is not a once-in-a-while supplement. Daily consistency for a minimum of 30 days is what allows your cells to fully load and the benefits to become noticeable. L stands for limit your caffeine window. Set a hard cutoff at noon or 2 in the afternoon at the latest. Caffeine has a half-life of roughly 6 to 8 hours. If you drink coffee at 3 in the afternoon, a meaningful amount of caffeine is still circulating in your bloodstream at 11 at night, quietly sabotaging your sleep quality, your recovery, and your overnight fat metabolism. And if you do not drink coffee at all, this still applies to you. You can dissolve the same scoop of creatine in plain water, in green tea, or in a morning smoothie. The creatine does not need caffeine to function. Coffee simply enhances and accelerates the delivery. But the cellular benefits of creatine itself are independent of the vehicle, so do not let a coffee preference stand between you and this protocol. Now let me set your expectations honestly. During the first week, you may not feel much. Your cells are loading up. Think of it as filling a reservoir. By week 2, most people notice subtle shifts, a bit more mental clarity, slightly better energy in the afternoon. By week 3, the changes tend to become more obvious. Improved focus, better stamina, and often the beginning of visible changes in body composition. By week 4 and beyond, you are looking at meaningful, measurable differences in strength, cognitive sharpness, and how your clothes fit. Here is where I need to be direct about safety. If you have existing kidney disease or a documented history of kidney problems, talk to your doctor before starting any creatine regimen. For individuals with healthy kidneys, the research is extremely clear. There is no credible evidence that creatine causes kidney damage. Human trials consistently show no elevation in creatinine markers and no renal impairment in people without pre-existing kidney conditions. But that conversation with your doctor still matters if you have any concerns at all. Also, quality is critical. This is where most people go wrong and then blame the compound itself. The majority of creatine sold commercially is manufactured under loose standards, often sourced from facilities with minimal regulatory oversight. Poor quality creatine dissolves badly, irritates the gut, causes bloating and water retention, and never reaches your cells in a meaningful concentration. If you have tried creatine before and felt puffy or noticed nothing, that was almost certainly a quality issue. Look for creatine monohydrate that is third-party tested, are free of heavy metal contamination, properly micronized so it dissolves cleanly, and ideally produced under stringent European manufacturing standards. The difference between pharmaceutical-grade creatine and bargain bin creatine is not marketing, it is bioavailability. If the powder does not dissolve fully, it sits in your gut, draws water into your intestines, gives you that puffy, bloated sensation, and barely reaches the cells that need it. You end up blaming the compound when the real culprit was the manufacturing. German-produced Creapure, for example, is considered the gold standard because it undergoes rigorous purity testing and delivers consistent particle size that your digestive system can actually process. That distinction matters enormously. One question I hear constantly is whether eating more red meat could replace supplementation, and I respect that instinct. Whole food sources are always worth prioritizing. But here is the math. You would need to consume roughly 2 to 3 pounds of beef every single day to reach the 5-gram therapeutic threshold. That is not practical for most people, and at those quantities you introduce other dietary considerations. Supplementation gives you precise, consistent dosing that ensures your brain and muscles reach full saturation without overloading your diet. Another concern people raise is whether coffee somehow blocks creatine absorption. This myth has circulated online for years, but when you look at the actual controlled research, there is no demonstrated reduction in creatine effectiveness when consumed alongside caffeine. More recent investigations have specifically examined this pairing and found no impairment in muscular uptake, no decrease in strength outcomes, and no interference with cellular loading. Coffee complements creatine, it does not cancel it. So here is your action plan. Pick up a high-quality creatine monohydrate. Stir 1 5-gram scoop into your morning coffee daily. Commit to 30 consecutive days. Track how you feel. Write it down if you can. Note your energy, your focus, your physical recovery, and whether your midsection starts to shift. And at the end of those 30 days, come back to this video and tell me what changed. Drop it in the comments. You are not deteriorating because of some irreversible countdown. But you are not foggy because your mind is failing. You are not gaining abdominal weight because you lack willpower. Your cells have been running on a shrinking fuel supply for years and nobody flagged it. This is fixable. 1 scoop, 1 cup every morning. That is the starting line. You now understand something about cellular energy and metabolism that the vast majority of people your age have never been told, and that puts you ahead. Use that knowledge. Share it with someone who needs it. A spouse, a sibling, a friend who keeps complaining about the same stubborn fatigue and the same stubborn belly. If this helped you, type the word fuel in the comments so I know you made it to the end. Subscribe if you have not already, because next week I am covering a specific type of fat, 1 single tablespoon daily, that has been shown in clinical research to triple autophagy, dramatically reduce inflammation, and accelerate fat loss. You can add it directly to the same morning cup. I will show you the science and exactly how to use it. I will see you there.